I know you told me when my girl was untrue, and I loaned you money when the funds weren't too cool. And I talked your folks out of making you cut off your hair. So let's be friends. No, let's be friends. Hello? I guess he doesn't want to be friends. Welcome back, my friends. What do you say we celebrate the anniversary of the Beach Boys' Friends? You might recall that for the album 2020, we took a deep dive look at the digital set I Can Hear Music, which covered outtakes of all different kinds, or alternate mixes, instrumentals, acapellas, all sorts of things like that. And it was a really fun look, a deep dive look at the production and the construction of an amazing album. And that same year, 2018, we got a little something to go with the album, Friends. So I figured with Friends anniversary today, let's take a look at Wake the World, the Friends sessions. Now 2018 saw several different Beach Boys releases. The big one that year, the Beach Boys with the Royal Philharmonic. This was the one that got released on vinyl and CD, was promoted very heavily by all of the 5 surviving Beach Boys, and was kind of the big Beach Boys product for the year. But we received several digital sets, the aforementioned I Can Hear Music and Wake the World, both made available for download on the same day. If you're like me, you downloaded them both as soon as you possibly could. We also got something I hope to cover in July, Beach Boys on Tour, 1968. We've talked a little bit about this before, but I really need to do a deep dive look into it. Of course, we've talked about many other digital sets, and some of those we'll be referencing as we go. Always check out my videos on various Beach Boys downloads. But let's take a look at this Wake the World compilation and see what all is there. Now, of course, we know Friends have been made available on CD and digitally and so on, with bonus tracks from the time period, but Wake the World is really kind of a deep dive into the world of the Friends album. And right off the bat, every single song on Friends, squeaky plastic, is addressed in the same order as the album. You might remember something that kind of frustrated me about that 2020 digital set was that although it did follow the sequence of the album songs, it actually omitted the 2 Smile songs. Our Prayer and Cabanescence were leftovers from Smile. They were completely skipped for the digital set. And I'm happy to say nothing from the Friends album was skipped or ignored. So whatever your favorite song from Friends might be, Friends of course is a big fan favorite, so everybody probably has a favorite. Whichever one it might be, there is something there for you to listen to. Some a cappella, instrumental, alternate take, some unused idea or rehearsal that you can find to go with each song. So what do you say we kick things off? Take a look at what all's on. Wake the World. Wake the World set actually runs about a half an hour shorter than the I Can Hear Music set. So the I Can Hear Music set, again, covered most of the songs on 2020, plus outtakes, plus some sessions and oddballs. Wake the World only runs about 68 minutes, which is about a half hour or so shorter than the I Can Hear Music set, but it does cover everything on the release. Alright, so we start off with the opening to Friends, Meant for You. On Wake the World, we get an extended version. You might remember Wake the World is Meant for You is one of the shortest Beach Boys songs, only about 40 seconds. We actually got the extended version before on Made in California. But the extended version here also includes a brief session take, that kind of thing. So pretty interesting there. I'm kind of glad they didn't use the lyrics from the complete version. You know, have you ever seen a pony run alongside of his brother, and that kind of thing. And not a big fan of all that. I'm glad they kind of just cut a piece out and used it. So if you have Made in California, you've heard most of it, but there's a little bit of session material on the digital set. Then we get to the eponymous song, Friends. We get both the backing track and the a cappella. The backing track has a brief count-in, but no vocals, and it's a really fun, kind of groovy instrumental for the song that most people would probably associate the album with first. The title song, of course, Friends. Friends was a minor charting hit It was also a live staple for a time. We'll talk more about that whenever we cover the On Tour 1968 bit. But it's important to note that the other track on here, which is Friends Acapella, so only vocals, was actually kind of sort of released along with the unused Beach Boys song Don't Fight the Sea. Don't Fight the Sea popped up on Al Jardine's postcard from California, but before it was released here, I'd say about 2009 or so, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below, but about 2009, Don't Fight the Sea was released as a special single. It was on white vinyl. It was to promote tsunami disaster relief, and that song, that recording, had Friends Acapella as a B-side. I don't own that for vinyl personally, I don't have that recording, but I found it online and I noticed at the end of that Friends Acapella there's a little bit of session chatter. That's omitted from this. So we still get the same basic thing, but we don't get the sessions that go with it. So keep that in mind. I'd say if you have that vinyl, hold on to it. Probably going to be a collector's item. But otherwise, you get the gist from this digital set. And that's all we have for Friends. Moving on to the title track for this box set, we have Wake the World, Alternate Take. This has a brief session intro where someone announces the song is a bad melody. Can't exactly tell who it is. Wake the World, of course, was used as the B-side to the Beach Boys' very successful 1968 single, Do It Again, which would also become a live staple and remains a live staple even today. You can see Wake the World as the B-side. It actually doesn't say on my copy that Wake the World's from the Friends album. I'm sure some records say that. We get an alternate take of Wake the World. The vocals and the instrumental's different, but it's still similar enough to the song you can basically tell what it is. Not a huge difference, just kind of like maybe tinkering with alternate versions of the same thing. Wake the World is the only song from Friends that I've seen live. I know not many songs from Friends are live staples, but some have been periodically. Glad I've got to see Wake the World, and I can recall when I saw it, Al Jardine announced, this next song is from the Friends album. A bunch of people cheered, yay, Friends! Because Friends is a big fan favorite. Next up we have Be Here in the Morning backing track, and When a Man Needs a Woman after that. The Be Here in the Morning backing track has no vocals, just simply a count-in for that. Still pretty interesting. When a Man Needs a Woman has both an early take backing track, which is just like a quick 50-second instrumental fragment. Nothing too interesting, probably just a rehearsal. And then we also have an alternate version running about 2:08, 2 minutes, 8 seconds, with some different lyrics. So that seems to be a song that they toyed and tinkered with quite a bit as they worked their way through it. So pretty interesting stuff. If you like that one, you got some alternate things to look at. We have Passing By, an alternate version. This one's very short, running only about 1 minute and 44 seconds versus about 2 minutes and 30 seconds for the final version. Mostly an instrumental, not all of the vocals are on it. We'll talk more about Passing By later on in this review as well, because we'll find that there were more lyrics intended for it than there actually were used. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But still pretty interesting to have this particular recording here. And then we get two things for Annalie the Healer. First up we have a session excerpt with Brian and Chuck Britz kind of talking about how to play the instruments. Chuck Britz talks to Al Jardine about how to play his guitar, that sort of thing. It runs only about 1 minute and 20 seconds, just some stuff to kind of get the song established. And then we have an a cappella version of Annalie the Healer. Really fun a cappella, very, very hip. Annalie the Healer, of course, is based on a real person, a German woman who is part of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's kind of entourage, and she practiced kind of, I guess, a natural medicine of sorts with her hands. Really interesting stuff. I'm sure she was very flattered to have a song written about her. We follow up with Little Bird. We have the backing track and then an a cappella. The backing track has a count-in. It's a pretty cool instrumental. Little Bird's pretty popular today too, as it was the B-side to that Friends single. And Little Bird has popped in and out of the live set at different points. Little Bird a cappella is pretty interesting too. Steve Kalinich, of course, is one of the writers for it, and I know he's talked about it started as a poem and then kind of evolved into a song. It's a really fun kind of nature song though. I think a lot of people enjoy Little Bird. Next up we have Be Still, alternate take with session excerpt. It's mostly session stuff. It's Dennis Wilson practicing the vocals and he keeps messing up or flubbing or someone else keeps asking him for another take. Indeed, it actually ends with someone telling him, "Another one please," at the very end. So even though Dennis does a great job on that song on the final record, I'm under the impression that over time he kind of had to try again and again and again until they got it just right. Alright, we followed up with Even Steven, which is an early alternate version of Busy Doing Nothing. Everybody loves Busy Doing Nothing. I sat and concentrated on the number, that kind of thing. It's a really fun song. Even Steven is kind of a faster and shorter version of that song, and Brian Wilson goes kind of berserk with it a little bit. I'm kind of glad they slowed it down and made it a little more kind of casual for the final album, that maybe he was intending it to be something more of a rocker or to be really hip, and that just doesn't quite suit the very simple, laid-back approach of the song. So, interesting alternate take, but I think we got the right thing for the final project. Followed up by Diamond Head, alternate version with session excerpt. Diamond Head is a fairly long instrumental, very Hawaiian. If you watch my Beach Boys in Hawaii video, I talk more about Diamond Head and actually visiting the physical Diamond Head and walking up the side of it. Very fun tourist spot in Hawaii. Highly recommend doing that. But anyway, this is a longer version, has some kind of counting in for an intro, that sort of thing. It also has a much longer outro to the song, and the song kind of like fades away in this weird, distant kind of cacophony. I really like that. I kind of wish they kept it for the final version. Really interesting stuff, and we don't usually see alternate takes of Beach Boys instrumentals, so it's always nice to kind of have one. And then we come to the end of the album with Transcendental Meditation. That was the big finale. If you've watched my videos before, you know that Transcendental Meditation is kind of the song that I don't think fits too well with the rest of Friends, as it's much more of an upbeat, crazy kind of tune, and it doesn't quite suit the quiet, gentle nature of the rest of the album. We get something called New Song, Transcendental Meditation, backing track, with partial vocals. This has a count-in, and that's kind of a mellower, slower version of Transcendental Meditation without all the horns and the heavy instrumentation that we have. There are also some wordless backing vocals still. I actually kind of like it better than what we got on the final product there. I think that the slower, calmer version works a tad bit better. Then we have Transcendental Meditation backing track with session excerpt. If you have heard the backing track, that might very well have been on Made in California, where just the backing track is made available, not the entire thing. About 1 minute and 50 seconds of this recording is just the backing track, the rest of the sessions. So if you just want that track, go with the Made in California. If you want the session bit, I'd say go with this set instead. And the reason why there's so many sessions is that at some point Brian Wilson stops the recording because somebody messed up somewhere in all the instrumentation. We have our Transcendental Meditation acapella. The instruments are still there because our instrumental breaks, but they're mixed way down. I guess as the song says, it's cool, it's cool, it's cool, it's cool. A little bit crazy for me there, and it's definitely very high energy compared to the rest of Friends. That does it for the actual core, Friends album. Everything on here has been addressed by at least one recording, be it an acapella, instrumental, alternate take, whatever. Now we get into some outtakes and some earlier things. We have My Little Red Book. Brian Wilson admired Burt Bacharach and Hal David quite a bit, and so he wanted to cover My Little Red Book. He does a really nice, I think it's completely solo, cover of the song. Sounds a lot like Manfred Mann's version, but Brian puts his own spin on it. If you like the version by the group Love, who had a big success with it, you might not like this one as well, because Love did something totally different with the song. But Brian's really into this, My Little Red Book, and maybe he couldn't sell the rest of the group or everybody else on it, so it just kind of got omitted. But it's a really cool look into what could have been, because we don't have any covers on Friends. So it's interesting to hear what a cover for the Friends album might have sounded like. We have a track called Away, a collaboration between Dennis Wilson and Billy Hinchy. A very Smile-like instrumental fragment, very short, only running about 50 seconds. Not really a lot to talk about. There are no lyrics on it, and as far as I know, none were ever written for it. Just kind of a little instrumental experiment that didn't really go anywhere. We have I'm Confessin' and You're As Cool As Can Be. These are basically the same. I'm Confessin' is the demo, kind of the rough draft name for it. Brian does an instrumental demo, mostly with his piano. It sounds pretty good, and even at the end of the recording he says, "Sounds good in here," or someone says that anyway. So they must have really liked this demo, because then they tried to morph it, started to kind of adjust it into a song called "You're as Cool as Can Be," and we get two different takes of that, upgrading this very simple piano demo into kind of a funky rocker that's really cool. Still an instrumental though, no lyrics I'm aware of. Pretty cool addition. I like that we get kind of different itinerations of this song as an early demo and then to something that would more resemble a backing track or an instrumental tune for the album. We get "Be Here in the Morning, Darling" track mix, not to be confused with "Be Here in the Morning." "Be Here in the Morning, Darling" is kind of a funky, up-tempo instrumental. Doesn't really have much in common with "Be Here in the Morning." It has more in common with like "Busy Doing Nothing." That's kind of something you could do this pseudo spoken word, almost like a rap, to. It's a pretty fun recording though. I'm glad it's here. We follow up with "Our New Home," just the track recording, kind of a gentle, almost sunflower-like instrumental. If you're familiar with songs like "Our Sweet Love," these very gentle love ballads that we saw in the Beach Boys' "Sunflower," you're going to get something kind of similar here. And new song, very, very beautiful, or excuse me, "Our New Home," very beautiful. Definitely recommend that. Followed up by "New Song" track, which is an early version of Transcendental Meditation. Very offbeat, very weird. I'm kind of glad they went in a different direction with it. I don't think it really suits the group. "Be Still," alternate track. Now we did see "Be Still" on the final album, but this is more of an upbeat instrumental. It's not really like the finished song. It's much faster. They must have at some point considered making Friends more of a wild and crazy album and kind of a gentle, calming one, because they were definitely experimenting with at least a few of these songs in a more upbeat way. We have my favorite from the entire digital set, their cover of Buffalo Springfield's "Rock and Roll Woman." Sadly, it's just instrumental recording. We don't get any vocals, but the group had toyed with that song before, and they had done it live. There's at least one Beach Boys documentary that has footage of the group doing it live. We've talked about Buffalo Springfield before on the live Sunshine set, where they joined the Beach Boys for Sloop John B. in one of these concert performances. Really good take there with Buffalo Springfield bringing kind of their own unique sound to the mix. I really, really like that. And apparently Mike Love said that at one time they had done a recording of "Good Vibrations," but that I don't think was preserved, unfortunately, which is a shame. But I really liked that they did Buffalo Springfield's song. Even the instrumental is really, really cool. I kind of wish they'd done more with that. We have "Time to Get Alone," alternate version demo. So "Time to Get Alone" would ultimately be used on 2020, but it actually dates back a few years earlier. It was written for Three Dog Night, then known as Redwood, and then they didn't use it or couldn't use it. So the Beach Boys took it and toyed with it during Wild Honey, but ultimately didn't use it there either. So here we get their ideas about using it for Friends. We only get one small demo. It's just an instrumental. They really don't do a whole lot with it. I'm under the impression that they toyed and tinkered with it for a few minutes and we're like, yeah, this isn't what we need. So "Time to Get Alone" will be put back in the can yet again. Nice that we have kind of an interesting alternate demo here, but there's not a lot. If you're a big fan of that song, if you really want to hear that deep and wide part that everyone likes, you're not really going to find it here. We have "Untitled," January 25th, 1968. Kind of just mostly banter between Brian Wilson and Chuck Britz. And then kind of just this rough instrumental. I don't think much was really done with it. You know, we have something similar to things that we saw, instrumental fragments on Live Sunshine, like "Honey Get Home" and "Hide Go Seek." Kind of fits more in that category. Doesn't seem like anything anybody really had a ton of plans for. Just something they were tinkering and toying with and just didn't go anywhere. Almost done. We have "Passing By," demo with new lyrics, circa 1971. So apparently at some point, perhaps as a solo project for Brian, in the early 70s, they were talking about going back and redoing some songs from Friends, presumably for Brian's solo album, that sort of thing. And Brian has done songs from Friends live, both on his albums and also as a solo artist. He did a new version of "Meant for You" on his album "I Just Wasn't Made for These Times," so that isn't unheard of. Surprising they do it as early as 1971, but but other people were involved, like Tandon Almar and Stanley Shapiro, and they were kind of working on how to adapt these songs, you know, take them out of this kind of gentle instrumental phase and put them into something new. So we get Passing By with lyrics. I'm assuming there were other songs done this way, but Passing By is the only one we have readily available. Interesting choice, and I think a pretty fun recording, but I kind of like Passing By the way it is on the Friends album. And we come to the big finale. You might remember there's nothing from Smile on I Can Hear Music. The Smile songs are just skipped, and they're not addressed. And I mean, admittedly, there are other archival Smile recordings that would have more material from that era for sure, and that's probably why they saw it fit to just, you know, we'll omit that and let people look at the Smile sets and discover it there. But we actually get Child is Father of the Man 1966 track. Now, if you have the big Smile box set, which I do, but I don't like to lug it upstairs for these videos, but that has a couple alternate takes of Child is Father of the Man, but those all have vocals. This digital set has just an instrumental, and it's really cool too. I actually kind of almost like it better in some ways as an instrumental. I think it sounds really neat, you know, and the only place you can get it too, I should add, that the Smile Sessions box sets don't have an instrumental version. But then, even though this recording's about 3 minutes and 40 seconds, it stops about the 3-minute mark and we get a brief hidden track. A bootleg recording of I'm in Great Shape and some of those other Smile songs from kind of that suite that was apparently recorded over a phone. So the quality has a noticeable drop. Doesn't sound great, but we do get some presumably Smile bootlegs or very rare Smile tracks. A brief excerpt as the hidden track and the big finale to this set. So pretty interesting stuff there. If you're a fan of Smile, definitely find something to like. And if you're a fan of kind of hidden tracks and little surprises, that works too. And that, my friends, takes care of Friends. Or should I say, Wake the World, the expanded digital recognition of Friends. Squeaky plastic still. So what are your thoughts on the Friends album? Or do you have the Wake the World digital download? If you do, I think you're in for a pretty mellow time, but there are a few upbeat, interesting experiments on there too. So please comment your favorite digital songs below, and go out there and wake the world, and we'll see you next time. So long, my friends.